I'm going live right now because today, May 26th, 2026, there is a documented, verified source story happening in your government that connects directly to Article 1, Section 7 of the United States Constitution, which is exactly what we're going over right now in the Revere Report. The section that tells us who is supposed to control spending in this republic and how laws that take money from citizens are supposed to be made. I want to be completely clear about what tonight is and what it is not. This is not a Republican program. This is not a Democrat program. I am not telling you who to vote for. I'm not advocating for any party or any politicians. What I'm doing tonight is taking the documented record, the Congressional Budget Office score, the verified polling data from Fox News, Quinnipiac, The Washington Post, and KFF Health Research, and I'm comparing it to what Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution says is supposed to happen when your government spends money in your name. That comparison is what this channel is built to make. The document versus the reality. The founder's design versus what is actually happening. Let's ride. Let me start with the documented facts. Just the facts about what has happened in your government over the last 10 months. Because the context is essential before we connect it to the Constitution. Fact number one, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. On July 4th, 2025, Independence Day, President Trump signed into law a piece of legislation called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It is officially designated as H.R. 1 of the 119th Congress. This is a documented, public, searchable law. Everything I tell you about it tonight comes from the Congressional Budget Office, which is the nonpartisan accounting office of the United States Congress. Not a think tank, not a political organization, Congress's own accounts. Here's what the CBO found. CBO, Congressional Budget Office. Here's what the CBO found. The CBO has said that the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which was signed into law by President Trump on July 4th, will add $3.2 trillion to the national debt over a 10-year span, resulting from a decrease in direct spending of $1.1 trillion and a decrease in revenues of $4.5 trillion. Including the additional interest owed on the expanded national debt, the total cost rises to more than $4 trillion over 10 years. I want to put that number in real terms. The national debt as of March 17, 2026, exceeded $39 trillion for the first time in American history. In May 2026, the national debt reached 100% of gross domestic product for the first time. That means the total debt owed by the United States government is now equal to the entire annual economic output of the country. Every dollar of value produced in America in an entire year would not be enough to pay off what has been borrowed in your name. Every dollar in an entire year wouldn't pay off the debt. Now, under reconciliation bill by 2027, the debt would exceed the previous record of 106% of GDP just set after World War II. We are on track to surpass our World War II debt level, not from fighting a world war, from domestic legislation passed through a procedural maneuver that bypasses the normal constitutional lawmaking process. It bypasses it. Here's fact number 2, what the bill actually does. One Big Beautiful Bill Act makes permanent the 2017 tax cuts, eliminates taxes on tips and overtime pay, boosts funding for border security, and makes significant reforms to Medicaid. The CBO found that between now and 2034, the law will cause more than 10 million people to lose their health insurance. I'm not here to tell you whether those trade-offs are right or wrong. That is a policy debate. What I'm here to tell you is what the documented numbers say and what the documented polling said the American people think about those numbers. Now, for fact number 3, what Americans actually think about it. This is where it gets directly relevant to our mission on this channel. Nearly 2/3, 64% of the American public holds unfavorable views of the One Big Beautiful Bill. Nearly twice the share who view it favorably at 35%. It is viewed unfavorably by large majorities of Democrats at 85% and independents at 71%. A Fox News poll, and I want to emphasize this was Fox News, not a liberal polling organization, found that 59% of Americans oppose the bill versus 38% who favor it. Among independents, 73% oppose it versus 22% who favor it. Even among white men without a college degree, the demographic most closely associated with the bill's political base, opposition runs at 53% to 43%. Now, a Quinnipiac University poll found that 27% of registered voters support the bill, while 53% oppose it. The Washington Post, an IPSOS poll, found a plurality of 42% opposing the bill versus 23% supporting it. Fox News, Quinnipiac, the Washington Post, Pew Research, every major polling organization, regardless of political orientation, found the same result. A majority of Americans opposed this legislation. And it passed anyway, and was signed into law anyway. Fact number 4, how it was passed. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act was passed through budget reconciliation, a legislative process that allows the majority to override the filibuster and pass legislation with 51 Senate votes instead of the normal 60. The Big Beautiful Bill was passed by the Senate after Vice President J.D. Vance broke a 50-50 tie. 50-50 in the United States Senate. The second most consequential piece of domestic legislation passed in the last decade, adding $3.4 trillion to the national debt, passed by Senate by the single narrowest possible margin, with the Vice President casting the deciding vote. I don't know about you guys, but I'm already finding some very upsetting facts about this big, beautiful bill. Fact number 5, Congress is already considering doing it again. With the 2026 midterms on the horizon, House Republicans are eyeing a second reconciliation package as a key vehicle to advance President Trump's agenda. A second reconciliation bill is being actively discussed in Congress as of May of 2026, while the national debt has already reached 100% of GDP. Those are the 5 documented facts. Now let's look at what Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution says about all of this. Here is where the Revere Report does something I believe is unique on YouTube right now. We're not going to debate the politics of this bill. We are going to take the documented facts we just covered and hold them up against the specific text of Article 1, Section 7 of the United States Constitution and let the founders speak for themselves. Connection 1. The Origination Clause. Article 1, Section 7, Clause 1 states, quote, all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate may propose or concur with amendments as on other bills, end quote. The founders placed the power to initiate revenue bills that take money from citizens, exclusively in the House, the branch elected every 2 years, the branch most directly and quickly accountable to voters, the branch you can replace fastest if you disagree with what they do. The reconciliation process that passed Big Beauty respects this technically originate in the House. But here's what the founders did not have anticipated in 1787 and what is worth examining carefully. The reconciliation process allows the Senate to pass fundamental fiscal legislation. Legislation adding $3.4 trillion to the national debt with 51 votes instead of the 60 normally required. Reconciliation lets the Senate majority bypass the filibuster process, allowing them to pass legislation with 51 votes instead of the normal 60. The founders designed the Senate specifically to be the cooling chamber, the deliberative body, the brake on hasty legislation. Madison wrote that the Senate was designed to proceed with, quote, more coolness, more system, and more wisdom than the popular branch, end quote. A 50-50 tie broken by the vice president is not what Madison described as deliberate wisdom. That is a majority of a closely divided body using a procedural shortcut to pass legislation that a documented majority of American citizens opposed. I'm not saying it is illegal. The reconciliation process is legal. It was created by the Congressional Budget Act of 1974, not by the Constitution. I'm saying it is worth asking whether it honors the spirit of what Article 1, Section 7 was designed to accomplish. Connection 2, the Resentment Clause and the veto. Article 1, Section 7, Clause 2 requires that every bill passed by both houses be presented to the President, who may sign it or return it with written objections. President Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill on July 4th, 2025. That is a constitutional process working as designed. A president who agreed with the legislation signed it. That is his documented constitutional authority. That part of Article 1, Section 7 was followed. But here's the question the founders' framework raises. Alexander Hamilton wrote in Federalist 73 that the veto exists not just as an executive tool, but as, and I am quoting him directly, quote, additional security against the inaction of improper laws, end quote. He argued the president would be, quote, ashamed and afraid, end quote, to sign a bill for illegitimate reasons because his signature was a public act on the permanent record. The CBO, Congress's own nonpartisan accounting office, found that bill debt over 10 years. The 30-year Treasury note reached its highest yield in almost 19 years, 5.2%, in the weeks following its passage. Interest rates approaching similar highs suggest markets are pricing in the fiscal risk of this level of borrowing. The Founders' Framework asks, when Congress and the President produce legislation that the documented majority of citizens oppose, and that the government's own accountants will say add billions to the debt, is the constitutional process of public accountability producing the result it was designed to produce? That is not a partisan question. It is a constitutional one. And it is the exact question Article 1, Section 7 was built to force us to ask. Connection 3. Jefferson's warning about generational debt. This is the founder's connection that I believe is most powerful. Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, wrote in a letter to James Madison in September 1789 these exact documented words. Quote, the question whether one generation of men has a right to bind another, I think not. The earth belongs always to the living generation. End quote. Jefferson was specifically arguing that no generation has the moral right to borrow money that future generations must repay without their consent. He called an accumulation of public debt, and this is in his documented correspondence, one of the greatest dangers to the Republic. The national debt now stands at $39 trillion. Dividing that debt equally among every American citizen, every man, woman, and child, each person's share is approximately $116,000. Your children did not vote for that debt. They were not asked. Newborn Americans arrive in this world already owing $116,000 to a debt accumulated by people who made those spending decisions before they were born. Jefferson called that a form of tyranny across time. He used that word specifically. I am not calling it tyranny. I am telling you what Jefferson called it in his documented writing in 1789. And here is connection 4. Washington's warning about what happens next. George Washington's 1796 farewell address warned about, and I'm quoting from the primary source document, quote, the accumulation of debt, the baneful effects of the spirit of party, and the danger of allowing one faction to concentrate power through the control of the legislative process, end quote. One political analysis published in May 2026 noted that there are good reasons to expect Congress to pass unpopular legislation anyway, because lawmakers respond to many inputs. The public's preferences are just one of them. The public's preferences are just one of them. Washington said that when government stops primarily responding to the people's preferences and starts primarily responding to other inputs, that is a definition of a government that has lost its Republican character. He said it in 1796. It's documented, and it is worth reading in the light of what the polling data shows about this legislation in 2026. Now, here's the part of this story that most Americans have not been told, and that connects directly to the Paul Revere Society's mission. Most Americans had not heard much about this bill when it passed. A Washington Post poll found that 34% of American adults had no opinion about the bill, and separately, 66% said they had heard only a little or nothing at all about it. 2/3 of Americans had heard little or nothing about legislation that adds $3.4 trillion to their national debt. Legislation the CBO says will cause 10 million people to lose health insurance. Legislation that passed the Senate 50-50. James Madison wrote in Federalist 51, and this is a documented primary source, quote, "A dependence on the people is, no doubt, the primary control on the government," end quote. A dependence on the people. The entire constitutional framework rests on citizens being informed enough to hold their government accountable. When 66% of citizens have heard little or nothing about legislation of this magnitude, that dependence on the people, that primary control Madison described, is not functioning as it was designed. This is not a partisan failure. It is a civic failure. And it is precisely the civic failure that Jefferson warned about, that Madison designed the Constitution to prevent, and that this channel exists to address. Now, I want to be absolutely clear about one more thing before we go on. Congress now has a second reconciliation bill under active consideration as of May 2026. House Republicans are eyeing a second reconciliation package as a key vehicle to advance President Trump's agenda with the 2026 midterms on the horizon. Under the current trajectory, debt is projected to rise from nearly 100% of GDP today to 125% of GDP by 2034. By 2027, it would exceed the previous record of 106% of GDP set just after World War II. The founders had no word for a $39 trillion national debt, but they had very specific word for what it means when a government borrows money from future generations without their consent, spends it on programs a majority of citizens oppose, and passes it through a procedural mechanism that bypasses the normal deliberative process the Constitution established. Madison called the accumulation of unchecked legislative power the very definition of tyranny. Jefferson called generational debt a form of bondage on the unborn. Washington called unresponsive government the beginning of the end of the republic. None of them were talking about a specific party. They were talking about a pattern of government that grows beyond its constitutional authority, spends beyond what citizens consent to, and gradually stops asking the people for permission. Asking the people for permission. That pattern, documented in 1787, 1796, and 1789, is documented again in the verified data of May 2026. All right. I've got 3 questions for you. You can answer them in the comments or in the chat, however you want to do this. I want to open this up to you completely now. Drop your questions in the chat. A few things I want to hear from you specifically. 1, did you know about the One Big Beautiful Bill and its CBO score before tonight? Yes or no in the chat. 2, do you believe the reconciliation process honors the spirit of Article 1, Section 7, or does it circumvent the deliberative process the founders designed? And 3, what would Madison and Jefferson say if they could read the CBO score of this legislation? Those 3 questions are for the chat, but ask me whatever you want. It's your live stream. The Revere Report exists to answer the questions the regular news does not ask. Being as this is our first live segment, there's only 4 of you there in the chat, and you guys all said hi back. I really want to start doing this every day, because I want to take one main current event, one main thing that the government is doing, and it's going to be nonpartisan, because the Revere Report and the Paul Revere Society are nonpartisan. We are not Democrat. We are not Republican. We're not liberal. We're American citizens that need to wake up and open our eyes to what our government is doing. The only way we can fix what's going on right now is by referring back to the Constitution and the values that the founders presented to us and the actual laws that the Constitution gave us, because they were for us, we the people. And our government is obviously not asking we the people. And even if they do ask we the people, they obviously are not listening to it. Just like right now, a great big thing that's going on right now, the Save America Act. Everybody's talking about the Save America Act. 94% of American citizens, that's Democrats, Republicans, Independents, everybody, 94% of American citizens agree that you should be an American citizen to vote in an American election. How long has it been in Congress right now and in the Senate right now? They keep pushing it down, keep pushing it down. Keep saying no, keep saying no. I remember in our Constitution, it says if the Senate goes on vacation when a bill is presented to them, that bill gets passed. Well, guess what? Yesterday, the Senate went on a 10-day vacation. The Save America Act is still right in front of them. Why is it not getting passed? Why are the American people not being represented by the representatives that we have elected? What's going on? Let me close right now with something that I want every American watching to carry with them. The founders did not build the Constitution as a historical document. They built it as a living, operating manual for self-governance. Every clause of Article 1, Section 7, the origination of revenue bills in the people's house, the requirement for public presidential accountability through the veto, the deliberative design of the Senate as a cooling chamber, was built to answer one fundamental question: who controls the money? And does that person answer to you? The documented facts we covered tonight raise serious, legitimate, nonpartisan questions about whether the answers the founders wrote into that document are being honored in 2026. Those are not my opinions. They are the CBO's numbers. They are the polling organization's data. They are Madison's and Jefferson's and Washington's documented words. Here is what I believe with every conviction I have. The Republic is not lost. The document is still there. The rights are still there. Every protection the founders wrote is still the supreme law of this land. But a republic governed by documents that citizens have not read, enforced by citizens who do not know what those documents say, enforced by citizens who do not demand that their government honor them, is a Republican name only. That is what the Revere Report exists to change, and that is what the Paul Revere Society was built to prevent. 3 things before I close right now. Subscribe to the Revere Report. Every subscriber tells YouTube this content matters and helps us reach one more American who deserves to know what we covered tonight. Share this live stream with one American, left, right, or none of the above, who you believe still cares about this republic. Let the documented numbers speak for themselves. And join the Paul Revere Society. The link is in the description and in the chat right now. It is a community of Americans who have decided that civic ignorance is not acceptable, and that the republic belongs to the people who understand it. I'm John Shoemaker. This is the Revere Report. The republic belongs to the people who understand it. It always has, The question is whether enough of us understand it in time. Ride with us.